or you don't feel right, or if you have a nasty rash, keeping you up at night. Don't worry about a thing,
Don't worry.
'cause Atticus Health will make you feel alright.
I'm Ilana Razbash, and this is Radio Architecture.
Good evening from beautiful Bunurong country. I am broadcasting to you live on Radio Karam from right here in the Karam swamp, from the ancient lands and unceded country of the Eastern Kulin Nations. As always, if you'd like to join us in the conversation and text your question through, please reach us on the studio text line on 0493 213 831. We'd love to have you with us. Tonight, my guests and conversation partners are Dr. Robin Williams and Gigi Williams. Robin is a distinguished photographer with 50 years professional experience as a practitioner, researcher, and teacher. He holds undergraduate qualifications in both scientific and medical photography and master's and PhD degrees in medicine. He is an accredited senior imaging scientist and a fellow of 7 learned societies. For 20 years, he has had a stellar career as a medical photographer, starting at Cambridge Medical School and culminating as Director of Medical Illustration and Teaching Services at Charing Cross and Westminster Medical School in London. Then Robin moved into academia and was a professor of photography for over 25 years and Dean of the Faculty of Art, Design and Communications at RMIT University in Melbourne. Robin was also a founding governor and chair of the Academic Board of Australia's top private photography college, PSC. He has published over 70 scientific papers and books and delivered over 400 presentations. His work has been widely exhibited, is in many public and private collections, and has been published in hundreds of magazines such as Time Life, National Geographic, The Observer, and New Scientist. His contributions to medical imaging have been recognised by the Williamson Research Medal of Royal Photographic Society, the Lancet Award, the BMJ Award, the Presidential Award of the British Institute of Professional Photography, the Norman Harrison Medal of the Institute of Medical Illustration, the Louis Schmidt Medal of the Biocommunications Association, and the highly prestigious Combined Royal Colleges Medal, twice given by the Royal Medical College for an outstanding contribution of imaging in the service of medicine. In recent years, Robin has concentrated on his personal work and has quickly established himself as a recognised landscape and nature photographer. He has already won many international awards for his work in this genre, including recently International Garden Photographer of the Year. Gigi Williams has been a professional photographer for over 30 years, having graduated from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. She is an accredited senior imaging scientist, a fellow of the Royal Photographic Society, the Biocommunications Association in the USA, and a fellow of the Australian Institute of Medical and Biological Illustration. She has been the recipient of many awards for her photography in Australia and the United States. In 2006, she was awarded the top honour of the BCA, the Louis Schmidt Award. She has had many years' experience as a practitioner and manager, most recently as director of a large creative department at the Royal Children's Hospital, providing photography, graphic design, video and web design to the hospital and the wider community. In 2016, she left her busy job to concentrate on her personal work and combined her science background with art. Since then, she's been privileged to travel extensively with her husband Robin and has been recognised with 64 international awards for her landscape and nature photography. In 2018, Gigi and Robin were guest presenters on Alan Fletcher's television series Photo Number 6. She says, although my images involve meticulous planning, there is an element of magic required. When heaven and earth, the moon and the stars all align, I am able to capture a unique moment in time, never to be repeated. I'm passionate about recording the fragile nature of our world and its inherent beauty in a world that is often full of hatred and conflict. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm so honoured to have you on. Long bios for our listeners to hear there, but so important, because how can you summarise or reduce or shorten at all such a body of work, such career, but also continued creative practice? And we will circle back to landscape photography and your current work. And I'm so interested in these intersections between science and art. And in many ways that reflects what architecture is too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's a magic combination, isn't it? You know, the technology and the creative, sensibilities, for want of a better word. And there aren't many fields of work or endeavour where you can actually do that. Usually you are in a pocket of, either technical, left brain or right brain, if you like, And I think it's like most design disciplines, there's a combination of those two ranges of skills.
Oh, absolutely. And the lasting contribution too, that isn't fleeting, because your images have been there in journals. They've substantiated research and records.
Yeah.
I think we all hope, don't we, in some small way, even if it's only in our own sphere of influence, to leave some sort of legacy, whatever that might be, whether you're a cook or whatever, you want to leave something, even if it's only Nana's recipe book, and I think that we all kind of strive for that notion of, leaving something behind that people will remember us by. And creative practice, a building or a great frock or a photograph, these are things that can be cherished well beyond the duration of the individual life that produced them.
It's really the great privilege of creative work.
Isn't it? Absolutely, yeah.
Before we get too far, there is a question I love to ask all my guests.
Oh, yes.
I'll start with you, Gigi. What is your earliest memory of a building or place?
Okay. Well, my earliest memory was in a place and a building. So it is my earliest memory. And that is me sitting in a high chair in our house in Beaumaris. It was a very small house, a 2-bedroom house, nothing like we aspire to today. And I was in the kitchen and my mother was watching this and telling me about this little mouse that was running on the skirting board in front of just below the sink. And that would be my earliest memory.
The mouse.
Of a place and a building.
But I'm struck by the mouse, this little animal, this creature, in a way, an exemplar of a laboratory specimen, right? in hospitals and medical imaging. And have you ever photographed a mouse?
I have actually. I have, yes. And I did have to do it at the Royal Children's Hospital, and it wasn't for a scientific purpose, it was for an advertising campaign. And it was a white mouse, and it had to have a red strawberry with it. And it was a black background. It was all on, very sleek black background. And it was a very cute little white mouse who we took out of the laboratory, but it was not debuting as a lab rat or mouse. It was a very, advertising sort of campaign.
Wow, I love that. What about you, Robin? What's your earliest memory of a building or place?
Pretty easy. So about age 5, my first primary school in Northampton in England. It was a Gothic building, with sort of little minarets and towers and things, very dark. I think it used to be a workhouse before it became a primary school. At the turn of the century. It was dark, it was smelly. I hated it, and it set me up to hate school for the next 15 years.
So you became an academic and a dean and a faculty dean.
Yeah, maybe so I could get my own back on the system, I think.
Do you remember when creative practice or photography or just wanting to express yourself first came up?
Well, for me, I would have been at school and probably about 12. I had photography in my genes, I think, because my grandfather was a great landscape photographer. He did some fabulous photos up at Mount Buffalo and around Victoria. And he had a full plate Thornton Pickard camera, which I've still got today. Mm. And my uncle was also very good at taking photographs and was very encouraging. So I had that background. But when, in school, I started taking photographs on holidays and I'd show them to my friends and they'd say, "You should be a photographer." And I thought I'd always wanted to do something with animals. And I thought, well, maybe I could combine it with photography. So I started doing the photography courses at the school and then, of course, found photography was a love.
And lifelong.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
I think the answer to that question, all photographers get asked this, on the internet or whatever, and the age gets younger and younger and younger. I saw one the other day who said, "Oh, I think I was about 3 when I took my first professional photograph," and I thought, this is absolute rubbish.
Everyone keeps giving kids iPhones.
Oh well, yeah, I guess. I think I was probably about 8 or 9, and in common with many, we're going back to the 1950s, so you've got to kind of picture that.
You're shooting film.
Yeah, absolutely. And my father, was a bit of a dabbler in amateur photography. So we had the bathroom converted to a little dark room and so on. And so I got my very first camera, little box brownie, when I was about 8 or 9.
And still black and white film as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no way we could afford colour, and colour in those days was just too esoteric. So it was all black and white. And so my first pictures were I can clearly remember my first roll of film. It wasn't too bad. And there were some pictures of the local church and the pictures of the girl next door who I fell in love with, at the age of 9 or whatever. So that was my kind of first introduction to photography. And in a way, it's never left me. Here I am in, my 70s, and it's still with me. Photography took a sort of back seat for a while, while I was doing lots of other things professionally, but it's always been there, and at times it's become the preeminent thing in my life, like it is now.
Do you still have those images from that very first role?
No. One of the things that was a feature of my background is that my father taught for the RAF in Britain, and so we moved houses every 3 years, and so lots of stuff gets lost, because you have to kind of lead a minimalist life when you're moving that often. And a lot of my very early work, certainly before I was about 15, a lot of that was lost. But from about 15, I've got things. I ran my own little company when I was 15 and 16, so I've got images from those days.
You started a photography business?
Yeah. Yeah. Photography is very expensive. It's a kind of an inbuilt feature now, a feature to iPhones and this, so people don't kind of factor that in. But, back in the sort of 60s, it was not something that, working class people did. We were working class. We didn't have a lot of money. And so if photography was something I needed to pursue, I needed to make the money in order to afford the cameras and the film and so on. And so I very pretentiously started up a little business. I'd mentioned I just photographed churches. Well, by the time I was 15, I kind of worked out there was this great idea. See, our little local church in our village was Norman and very well thought of, had lots of visitors. So I photographed this with my plate camera, and I produced some postcards. And I went along to the vicar and the parish council, and I said, "Here's some postcards. You could put these at the back of the church. I'll sell them to you for whatever it was, 6pence, and you could sell them for a shilling, and so you could make some money." And and that was the start of my business, and it went very well, and word spread. And so I photographed just about every church in Buckinghamshire.
Well, there we go. There's the first intersection with architecture.
Yeah.
At 15.
Yeah. There you go. So
every church in your county, in your area.
Pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah. Some were more successful than others. If the church had some particular architectural feature, like St Michael's had a unbelievably well preserved Norman arch, and so visitors from all over the world came to that. Some of the churches had not a lot to recommend them, and therefore the postcard sales were not very great. But that was their problem, not mine. I sold them wholesale.
A big spire, a big bell,
it's got to be
buttress.
something. Yeah, some aspect of the building that people would come to look at. The local villagers were never going to buy a postcard of their own church.
Was there an image from that series or people who connected with the images that really surprised you? Do you remember?
No, except we went back together. They say you should never go back to your places.
If you
of your
enjoy something,
childhood.
never
yeah,
go back.
that's right. But we did. We went back to St Michael's Church a couple of years ago, and walked into the church, and the ladies were doing the flowers, inside the church, and she turned around and she said, "You're Brian Williams." Well, Brian was my elder brother, but the connection was made. And when I said, "No, I'm Robin," the postcards. And she said, "The postcards." So this was 50, 60 years later. So yeah, it's incredible how some of these things make a connection, a human connection.
Well, you would have made them feel very special as well. Their church, their local community, this building that was so important to them was also important to you because you documented it and then you shared it with people.
Well, it was important to me because I was able to buy a new camera with the proceeds. So
and the next film and do all the developing.
That's right.
Gigi, I'm really interested in how does medical photography and scientific photography come up as a specialty? I'm sure many listeners don't actually know that it is its own discrete discipline. And
yes,
I was just as surprised as perhaps many listeners are this evening when I first learnt about it.
Well, as I said, I knew I wanted to do something with photography and I was thinking it was animals, but I was also quite good at maths and science. So And RMIT had two streams of photography degrees, and one was a science stream and one was an art stream. And so I thought I'd go along to the science stream. And of course, once you do that, you get exposed to a whole lot of things like high speed, and I could have gone to CSIRO, could have gone to police, and medical came up. And, you never know what you're going to be when you go to university, do you? You just look at the opportunities and grab them, I guess. And one of my lecturers had been a medical photographer, and so he knew the medical photographers in the other hospitals very, very well. And one day, I hadn't even finished my degree, and the Royal Melbourne Hospital photographer needed somebody, and he wanted a graduate. And so he spoke to my lecturer, and he recommended me, and they said, "You've got to go up for an interview." And this was just before I'd finished the degree. I certainly wasn't prepared or, in any mode of...
You didn't have a folio?
I had thongs on, for crying out loud. I was a student, And they said, "No, come up anyway." And I went up for the interview and I got the job straight away. So that was my entree into medical photography. But yes, it's people often think of medical photography as being X-rays, and that's just not right. It's anything that's visual, that's requiring some sort of documentation for teaching or research or the case history. So think dermatology, think plastic surgery, scoliosis, anything that's requiring some sort of documentation. And the thing with medical photography is that it's got to be very standardised. So each photographer, we had a team of 5 at the Royal Children's Hospital, and each photographer would have to be able to go and take exactly the same photograph of that patient a month later to a year later. It didn't matter who the photographer was, it had to be standardised. So the same lens, the same background, the same lighting, etc.
Wow. Such a precise science, indeed.
Exactly, which we were all in control of all those, lighting aspects and so on. So quite different to landscape.
Do those two streams still exist?
Yes. Well, no, that's not actually strictly true. They've separated photography out. So photography now sits in RMIT in a science faculty for the things that Gigi's been talking about. And within the art school are what I would call the creative aspects of photography. So they've actually separated them across 2 different faculties.
So you have to make your decision much sooner.
Oh.
Yeah, which I think is very regrettable. I mean, I think that there's a lot to be gained from being exposed to, as Gigi said, until when you're at school, you have no idea that these things exist. And, it's the same, I'm sure, in design. The differences, the technical differences, between, say, industrial design or architecture, wouldn't be something you would understand as a student at school. So you need to be exposed to all this. And the same with, I know many people that started in, drawing that finish up in sculpture, or and that's because exposed to those higher levels of independent study.
And education needs to hold space for that journey.
I think so. I mean,
absolutely.
I think that we've, one of my observations as an old man, is that we've become far too sort of specialised, and that people, I think, are just excluded from all sorts of worthwhile pursuits, not just as a job, but even within their own lives, because they've sort of been channeled very, very early on into, oh, you should be, or you will be, or worse still, you can't. The first opportunity I gave up French because my French teacher said, I was completely useless at it. Whereas, and to this day, I've never learnt another language. And so I think it's a great mistake in education to close off those options to explore what it is that you find exciting or interesting.
When you were faculty dean, what was your big mission or goal with the students? And
I think I'll separate those out, because I think my big mission was really all about multidisciplinary work. Because when I came to RMIT, 1992, everything was still very separate. So you entered and you did fashion, or you did textiles, you entered and you did scientific photography, and you would never experience anything across. I came from a world in the UK where we'd already started multimedia and started these cross media. So it doesn't have to be multimedia as we know it today, but just simply, for example, getting the creative photographers to work with the fashion designers. That's a very natural collaboration. It's what happens professionally. And so, creating programs and assessment that allowed you to do that, to work in a multidisciplinary way, was basically my raison d'etre. It was my great passion, and I think we achieved that.
do you have something that the students taught you in return? Like, what was your biggest lesson from that time?
I think, actually, the students, via a member of staff, through my head of graphic design, said, we hear you, we understand you, Robin, we want to do it too. But you've got to understand that these young students have come to us at 18, and they are passionate. They've got a passion in their belly. They want to be a fashion designer. So the longer you keep them from doing that, the more they're going to dislike the program. So I said, okay, so how can we resolve this? So we resolved it by saying, okay, we'll turn this on its head. Instead of the convention of having like a foundation year and then specialising as you go towards graduation, we'll turn it around the other way. We'll specialise straight away, and then we'll force you to broaden out. So you come in, you do nothing but fashion for a year. Okay, you're pleased with that? Now we're going to make you work with the photographers in second year, and in third year we're going to make you work with the IT students, because they're going to show you some U-Butte design programs and so on. So we kind of turned the old model of generic skills and then specialist skills. We turned it around and said, okay, we'll give you the specialist skills that you so think you want, but then we're going to allow you to assemble a course progressively and to explore, to try things out. And that worked. Mm. But we wouldn't, this is where you have to be kind of flexible. It's, you got this idea that this is going to be the perfect form of education. But actually you've got to listen to, in our case, the customers. The students were the customer. And they had come to us for a very specific reason. And they didn't want to be denied that, day one.
What's your biggest piece of advice to students and our younger audience?
Oh, well, I actually think you say that, being told that you can't do things is really the worst thing. I think the other side of the coin is to be told that you can do anything that you want. I actually think that's a really big problem. And, you know, a lot of young people have been told that all the time, you know, recently, in the last 10 years, and they've actually been really disappointed to find that they actually can't do what they thought they could. And they're really, you know, so down about it all. So I think I think there's got to be a reality check.
In a practical sense, as in they've got to pay the bills. Right?
Absolutely.
If you want to be an adult, you want to have a
Absolutely.
mortgage and a home and
Exactly.
do the simple practicalities.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can blend the two, can't you? You can on the basis of a natural skill set, you can forge a career path which will, in your words, pay the bills. But you may also have a personal interest. You know, you might train to be an accountant because you're really good at maths and that's going to pay the mortgage, but you might really enjoy writing poetry, and the system at the moment kind of stops you doing that. And I think, you know, if you can be that whole person, you know, perhaps you won't earn your living that way, but it may be a really balancing thing in your life. To have those other passions and those other interests.
I feel that you both managed to do that really well.
Oh,
I don't
so.
know.
All right.
What's your biggest
Medics are terrible at this. You know, they're brilliant surgeons. They're great philosophers. They play musical instruments. They, you know, they swim. So it's a common feature of medical schools is that they think they can do everything.
And they usually can.
Yes. Sadly, they usually can.
What's your advice, Robin, for our listeners on? Is there one number one key or habit or trick or something you might advise people to go after to be at least on that path towards being a whole person?
Yeah, do something you love. Really, you have to do something you love. I've spent a large portion of my life talking to young people about, whether they should go to university, or if they go to university, what degree should I do? And my answer is always study what you love. Outside of a very small number of discrete professions, incidentally that includes architecture and medicine, but outside of the state-registered professions, where you can't build a building that falls down on people, and you can't be allowed to operate on people without a degree of intervention. So, but beyond those, mostly your degree doesn't matter. What you need to do is if you study something you really love, you will do really well at it because you enjoy it, which means you'll get a really good degree. And I can tell you that really good degree is a passport to any field of employment. You may have to do some extra, what I would call training after that to tailor you to a particular professional outcome. But basically that, just having the huge privilege, and I consider it a massive privilege, the privilege of being able to study what you love for 3 years has got to be wonderful.
It really is. It really is, especially in our amazing education system in Australia with some remarkable tertiary education, incredible professors.
Yeah.
I've been privileged to not only do a degree but higher degrees and a doctorate and so on. All on no money at all. I mean, I said earlier in our conversation, we came from a very poor background. Neither of my parents went to university or indeed college. They left school at 16. And I've done all of that because we have, both in Britain and in Australia, we have a system that actually allows people to do that. And I think that's wonderful.
Mm. Let's talk about creative practice and landscape photography. Mm-hmm. When did you get to shift into it being most of the time or right before going full time?
It was after we left our busy jobs, really. And we decided that the kids had gone home, left home. We had some time to think. And I mean, I think that it's interesting actually when you think back on being in a hospital. I loved the Royal Children's Hospital. I was there for 33 years. But we didn't have working from home you were there. It was committed. Like you'd be 12-hour more, days a week inside, right? And so I just, on the weekend, I would think it doesn't matter what the weather is. I just need weather,
Right.
I just need to get outside into nature. And so I think that really, once you get out of the four walls, then you can start thinking, oh, let's get back to our photography. We were managers and we hadn't really taken photos that much anymore. We've got the time now. Let's do some travel and some photography. And that's when it happened, about 10 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think very, very similar. My life was full of people, in any context. So as a dean of a faculty of a modern university, you have a diary that's full from 8 in the morning till sometimes 10 at night, and it's all people. It's either one-on-one or face-to-face meetings, or meeting students or staff, or glad handing potential donors, or it's people. And I love people, but once you've done that for 30, 40 years, you quite like to just lie in a field and look at the sky. and really that, I think G's right. I mean, that is what landscape photography does for us. I think we're probably more invested in it now than when we started, but certainly at the start of the process, it was very much an escape. As you say, take a deep breath and feel the rain on your face. And I think that was the start. I had photographed landscape back when I was a youngster, so it's sort of come full circle for me. But for 20 or 30 years in between, I didn't shoot a landscape at all.
There's a profound correlation between architecture and kind of this fleeting moment you described that I read out in the bio, that you capture an image and it might never happen again because the landscape is dynamic and it's
no
changing.
might about it. It won't ever happen again. The clouds will never be the same. There will never be another minute like it is now. Never.
What a lesson in being present for all of us.
Absolutely.
It's a funny sort of thing because it also requires the investment of a great deal of time. So you might so you'll find something, a particular landscape that you have some feelings for and empathy for, something a story that you really or a narrative that you want in a sense to tell through your photograph. But it's not right. The weather's not right, or the light is not right, and so on. And so you might sit for 4 hours, with nothing happening at all, except lying there on your back and looking at the clouds. And then all of a sudden it comes together. And sometimes that is 10 seconds, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You've got to be on the ball.
So,
or you'll miss
and then
it.
it's all over. Show's over. Those beams of light or whatever it was that absolutely brings the concept together in an image, and it's all over. And you see, we've seen people, on the land waiting to take photographs, and they're in the car on the phone, and it all happens, and they come stumbling out of the car, falling out with their camera bag, trying to get ready, and it's gone. And you go, yeah, that's what it's all about. It's about, it is about, well, you could talk about it, Darla, but it is about mindfulness, because Gigi's very keen on that sort of thing.
Such
it is
a
about
meditation
it's
on
actually
patience.
being, it's being in the zone, in the moment, so that you are aware of the change that is about to happen, because that's the moment you've better be ready. That's not the moment to be finding that your battery's dead, or that you forgot to put the filter on, or to get the tripod out, or whatever it is. Those are the gifts that are given, and if you're not ready for them, you miss them.
Wow. Well, that's really, really beautiful ideas, and beautiful for many to just consider challenging themselves and go and do that for a day, and be out there and be in communing with the natural world.
It's wonderful. And you do get into the zone. Once it is all happening, you are just concentrating on getting that shot and nothing else matters. Everything else is blocked out. I mean, I don't know about you, but every day, you know, even just going for a walk on the beach, you get interrupted by your phone. There'll be an alert come in about the news, this or that. But you never really, I'm always thinking, of something different. Whereas when I'm shooting and I'm absolutely in that zone, nothing else matters. I'm so concentrating on what is happening in front of me and capturing it. And that is wonderful. A wonderful escape.
Flow
Yeah,
state.
it is. It's about creative flow. And
Yeah.
that's not, I don't mean to use that as jargon, but it is that state. It's where there's this Hungarian psychologist with an unpronounceable name called whatever it is. And, I won't pronounce it, but he kind of invented this concept of creative flow, and it is when you're right at the highest level of your skills, and the task in hand is the most challenging that you've ever faced. And when those two things come together, you go into this phase that Gigi is describing, and that's when you produce great work. Or great ideas, or great, this is when creativity really comes to the fore. You've got, and it's that combination. You've got to have the skills, because if it's a challenging thing and you haven't developed your craft, whatever that might be, that doesn't matter whether that's woodwork or panel beating or whatever. If you don't have the craft skills, you're not actually going to be, as I described it, you're not ready. You're not ready for that moment, that gift. So you've got to have the skill level, but it's also got to be something, in a sense, it's that phrase called, like worthwhile work. It's got to feel a challenge. Often, if it's not challenging, you might have the skills to do it, but it's boring. It only becomes true creative flow when it's really challenging, but you've actually got the skills to crack it. And then, then you've got to really find that time, that mental space to just focus on the task in hand.
And I think it's interesting about the skills, because I think COVID taught us a very big lesson. COVID was a complete disaster. We couldn't travel anywhere. It was locked up for 5 kilometres, awful. And you lose, if you're not practising all the time, you lose the skills. You need to be practising. It's like you often compare it to a wonderful, musician or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. If you think of any musician, a great violinist, and they practice, so they might be at the pinnacle of their career, age 50, playing for the London Philharmonic, endless records to their bio, but they practice 6 hours a day, and you go,
minimum.
Don't you know how to play the violin yet? And the reality is that if you don't do that, you lose it.
Yes.
You start to lose it. It's incredible how quickly it goes.
What does great art mean to you?
Well, I think great art to me means that it whatever it is, whether it's a photograph or sculpture or whatever, it has the capacity to move someone, the viewer. So, there's always two participants in art: the creator and the observer. And so, I think that if you can create, in our case, in landscape work, one could be uncharitable and say, well, you're just photographing something pretty. You go out into the landscape and God created something nice to look at, and you just create a facsimile of that. Well, yes, and in some senses that's landscape, but it's not what we strive to do. What we strive to do is to produce a landscape photograph that when the viewer comes to look at it, they feel moved by it. They feel an emotion. And that may vary depending on what the particular photograph is of, but they feel something themselves. Now, usually it's not a direct association. It's not like, oh yes, I've been there and I felt this. No. They're drawing on a kind of reservoir of thousands of experiences and images that are somewhere locked away in their brain. And the piece of art that you produce resonates somewhere with that library of experience, and it moves the viewer. And they stand there and they seek deeper layers of meaning. That's great art, and that doesn't matter whether it's a basilica, or whether it's a sculpture or a piece of furniture, or indeed a photograph. That for me, if it moves in some way emotionally, engages the viewer, that's great art.
Couldn't have said it better.
Listeners, we are so lucky tonight to have this masterclass from two absolute masters, but just the way you synthesize a whole career's worth of wisdom, Robin, and especially as faculty dean, the way that knowledge is being shared on this platform and discussed this evening is bringing huge joy and entertainment to me, but I'm sure to our listeners as well. And as you were describing great work and great art, and you'll have to remind me, though, which one of you took the image of the Namibian sand dune.
That's absolutely Gigi, so I'm going to let her take the...
It was mine. It is mine.
Magnificent image
thank
in
you.
high contrast, and at first you can read that it's a sand dune, and then the shadow is so intense it turns to this abstracted darkness.
I love that whole experience of taking that photograph. I mean, Namibia was an incredible place to go to for a start, but those sand dunes, they're not little sand dunes, they're just enormous sand dunes, and the play of light on them, the orange sand and then the black shadow, which I really played up, so it was absolutely black, and it was a tiny bit of detail there, and then the brilliant orange, and of course it's got this sort of like a D shape basically, to make it very graphic. That was a fabulous trip, and I was very pleased with that shot, I must say.
How long were you in the field to take that image?
Well, in the field,
Well,
for
we were there for about 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and when we're on location, so these are not holidays. These
No.
are work.
No, you're working.
These are
They're
working
missions,
trips. We're working,
missions.
and
Go
so
back.
we're up always an hour or 2 hours before dawn.
I'm not a morning person,
We're
remember?
on location. Yeah, remember, she's not a morning. And we'll still be working in what's called the blue hour after sunset, So we won't get back to our accommodation till sometimes 9 or 10 at night, at which point we upload all the photographs and check that they're okay. So we work typically, 22-hour days when we're doing these things. So we're out in the field a lot. So we were in those dunes for...
And going back to them at different times of the day.
Repeatedly. Because you do research, so, you don't just... if you're doing this professionally, you don't just rack up somewhere and go, I wonder if there's a nice picture here. So you do your research on where you think there's likely to be there, and you look at your sunrise and sunset times. You look at the angles of the light, much the same as an architect might look at the angles of the light on a building, and, which sides are going to be lit and which side, where is the wind going to blow. We do the same sorts of things for, for a location for photography. But at the end of the day, there's absolutely no substitute for being there on the ground, seeing how the light plays with the shadows and the shapes, and then, that will often mean coming back, again. One famous location in Scotland, I think, how many times did we do that?
The Lakes District.
Yeah. In the Lakes District.
7 times.
7 days we spent trying to get one shot.
Wow. An enormous amount of tenacity, an enormous amount of energy.
Yeah. Getting up early is not my forte, I can tell you. But I do it because once I'm there, once I'm up, I'm out, and then I can see the light coming up. I love it. And I go into that zone again because you can see the light on the land, and it's just, sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes you get up for nothing. It's raining, it's nothing. But you have to go. There's no way you can stay in bed. You're never going to get the shot if you stay in bed, and you can't trust the forecasts. They're always wrong. So you absolutely have to go out and see. And, we were in New Zealand recently, and we had 3 fantastic sunrises in a row, which is just unheard of, really. You know, so you just can't loll away in bed. You've got to get up and go.
But it's fantastic. You know, I must say, to watch Gigi when she's at work, because at that time of day, normally speaking, not being uncharitable,
No,
I'm the same at night. You know, she's not very with us.
No,
you know,
definitely not.
everything's a struggle. But when we're on location, she's like a machine. She's just so engaged in the task. And unlike me, I mean, there are differences in the way we photograph. One of the things that always amazing us is we can both be out in the same location with tripod legs almost interlocked. That sounds very sexual, doesn't it? But but we can be exactly in the same place together, you know, and come back with completely different results. You know, we see things differently, we photograph things differently, and Gigi is, I don't know what the correct term would be, but, you know, she's an explorer. So she'll explore, does it look better this way or that way? Maybe I should go around this side. Maybe I should do this. And so, you know, early in the morning, you know, with the light changing, she's moving around all the time. I arrive, get my tripod out, put it up, plonk the camera on the top, and I go, this is the shot. Got it, fantastic. And I put my tripod away, and I think, what's she doing? You know, and then we go back, and I've got one boring picture that kind of
it's never boring. I can
missed the
tell
mark,
you.
and she's got 15 different variants on a brilliant shot. You know.
He's short selling himself.
So I don't have that June shot. I have a June shot, but it's not that one. You know, and that's the one
You've
that
got
gets
plenty.
everyone.
And that
Another
one's
one.
the international prize winner.
It
Yeah,
is,
it is, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You very much complement each other in both the way you work and the way you see, and even just that
Yeah.
night and day, because
Yeah, that's true.
one has the energy in the morning and
Absolutely.
the other has the energy in
Yeah.
the evening,
Yeah.
and together you can fuel
Yeah.
for 22 hours.
And we do work as a team that way too, because we're quite competitive in one way. Like, we'll go back to the room at night and we'll say, okay, who's got the pick of the day? You know, and we'll have a, you know, I've got it. But really, we're just concerned about one of us getting the shot. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really matter who gets it, but one of us has to get it.
And I think sometimes because we think differently, we can compensate for one another's deficiencies. So in that same way, you know, when I've taken my shot, Gilles will say, "You got to be kidding! You know, why don't you go over there? Why don't you take your camera off the tripod? Why don't you?" And in the same way, you know, there may be something that Gilles doing, and I'll go, "You have remembered, haven't you, to set your white balance to whatever?" I just go, "Oh, you know, whatever." And so, you know, we sort of back
Yeah,
each
we
other
are,
up in
definitely.
that sense, but we are working, you know, quite independently, even though we're in the same location. And people can't quite believe that. Usually, I mean, this is radio, so we can't show you the photographs.
but we'll share some on our Instagram for the
um,
follow-up listeners.
But
don't
we
worry.
can show you pairs of photographs that were taken at exactly the same time, same location, completely different.
And once again, you're in your own little zone, so you're not paying attention to the other person. You know they're there somewhere, but you don't know what they're doing. And then you get back to the room and you think, I never saw that. Where was that? You know, it's a complete revelation of how the other person's seen the scene that you've just been in together, right next to each other.
That's so beautiful.
But the other thing we did notice, though, because as you would recall, you know, Robin's the dean, he's a big strategic thinker, and we discovered that that's what his photography's like. He sees the big picture. Well, you can explain it better than me.
Well, no, I mean, I think, well, it was your observation quite astutely. You know, when we're trying to work out why do we photograph the way we do, you know, and yes, I think, you know, it is all about how your brain's wired and what comes naturally to you. And I'm very much a big picture person, so I often shoot with a wide angle lens because I feel like I've got to get, you know, everything in the shot. Whereas she's quite a detailed person, and she needs to know that, you know, so she's a builder, you know, she's a road builder. It's got to, you know, if this doesn't happen, that won't happen. If that doesn't happen, that won't. And so she will isolate parts of a scene, you know, to make that record. And so that's very much part of our kind of personality. And I've also, you know, I guess whether it's learned, you know, on the job, but, you know, I've I've had a career where I've had to make fairly quick, informed decisions based on, massive data sets. People will tell you this and that and that. Some of it conflicting, some of it, and you have to make a quick decision. And so my brain has been wired to do that. So I look at a scene and I see the one shot, the winning decision, if you like. And I take it, and I've persuaded myself in photography that I'll get that shot first and then I can get some other shots like Gigi does. I don't. Once I've got that shot, I've convinced myself that there's never going to be a better one, so why don't I just pack my camera away? Whereas Gigi is used to that whole idea of kind of exploratory, let's just play with the data, let's see where it goes. And so it's very different. Very different.
There'll be other times where, well, especially with the wide angle, I just can't see wide angle like Robin sees wide angle. So we'll go to a location and it's definitely wide angle. So he's shooting, he's very excited and he's working away. I haven't taken a photo because I can't see a photo to take, and you've been the same
But that'll
in
apply
other,
exactly.
where I'm so excited about what I'm seeing.
And I'm wandering around with a camera going, what are you doing, woman? Let's go and have coffee.
In effect, you have three creative practices because there's your work individually and there's your work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's true. Yes.
And sometimes, we've described working together but separately, in the landscape. But occasionally we do undertake, creative projects, conceptual projects, that not landscape, that we conceptualise together and we work on together, basically in the studio, if you like, as opposed to out in the landscape. And so we've really enjoyed doing that as well. That's a different way of working. Is much as you might work as a team of creative writers, bouncing ideas off one another. If you're writing a script for a television program, it's rarely one person that does it. It's a combination of skills, and we really enjoy doing that too. And that was, you spoke earlier about COVID. That was our saving grace during COVID. Is we worked in the studio. We worked in the house in the studio on conceptual work, on conceptual projects. Some of which I think was some of the best work we've ever done. So that so that's another way of working. We don't work that way in the landscape, but we do work that way in the studio.
Do you have a dream destination?
Oh, I think I went on it earlier this year.
Where was that?
Tahiti for me.
Tahiti.
No, we've been to so many amazing places.
Where's next?
I can't remember. Where are we going?
We're going to Sri Lanka.
Oh, that's right, Sri Lanka. But I think if I had to choose, locations we've been to as opposed to the promissory note of something in the future, I think that Iceland was absolutely amazing. And we've been to Iceland across the seasons, summer through midwinter. It is an extraordinary landscape. It really is. And I think that, yes, as you say, we've been to so many places. So it's like asking you, who's your favourite child? You can't have one. But if I was forced to have one, I would say Iceland. I think that's the...
The US has been pretty amazing too, though.
The
Utah, the
US
canyons and...
US landscape, because it's such a
national parks are
large
incredible.
continent. And until recent jurisdictions, it had such a well-protected national park system. Those landscapes are so well protected and preserved, but so different from north to south, that if you wanted to go to a country to experience all that landscape can offer, yes, the United States is tremendous.
It's a must-do. My favourite architect of all time, Antonio Gaudi.
Right.
Famous for creating the Catalan identity, or the Catalan identity in architecture.
Yeah.
Used to say that copying from nature was collaborating with the creator.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in effect, that capturing that perfect moment in the image that is never to repeat again has that same act of collaboration in it.
Exactly. And the excitement of going out and not knowing what you're going to come back with.
Yeah.
You might have an idea of what you might come back with, but No, you come back with so many things that
think-
you couldn't possibly have thought of.
I think that's a really important thing to say, is that you can't be a good medical photographer without understanding medicine. You can't be a good food photographer without understanding food, or architectural photographer. And landscape is the same. So you don't just, kind of write a shot list of the great things you're going to photograph and go out there and do it. That's not what produces great landscape photographs. You have to understand the landscape. And the only way you're ever going to understand the landscape is to spend time in it. You have to invest time and emotion in a landscape. This is where, if we look to our own, indigenous cultures, this is, they see the land. They really see the land because they've invested 60,000 years in understanding it and what it's about and how it came about and the stories that are attached to it. And in a tiny, tiny sort of way, that's what you have to do as a landscape photographer. You can't just rack up and say, here's the shot, and snap it. Well, yeah, you will snap it and it'll match 100,000 other snaps of that location on Instagram. But if you want to produce a picture that, as we said earlier, produces an emotion in the viewer,
With feeling.
Needs to
you've
speak
got
to
to experience that landscape. It's got to get under your skin. And you're not going to do that by winding down the car window and pointing your iPhone out of the car window.
What's your biggest piece of advice to people who feel it's too late for them to be creative?
Oh, it's never too late. Not unless you're dead.
Make a start.
Yeah.
Make a start. Creative practice is not something you can sit down and think about. Just do it. Doesn't matter what it is. Just do something.
And it's okay to be bad at the beginning.
Oh,
Of
please.
course it is.
Absolutely.
And, I think that all learning is based on the ability to make mistakes in a controlled environment. That's what learning is. So make the mistakes. The controlled environment just means you're not going to kill someone, or serious consequences to those mistakes. So a controlled environment might be nothing at all. If you're doing a painting, you're not going to hurt or harm anyone. So go wild. Just do it. And and it doesn't. I think it's really important to understand you're not doing it for someone else. You're doing it for yourself. Because I think that's what puts people off. They start a creative project or whatever kind it is, writing a book or whatever, and then they show it to their best friend who reads it and says, "Oh, that's a lot of rubbish. I don't think you should continue with that, Ilana. I'd do something else if I were you." Well, that's not what it's about. If you write that novel and you feel good about it, that's great.
Never show your friends, never show your mother.
No, you don't have to please anyone except yourself, and you don't have to please yourself all the time either. That's about growth. That's about saying, no, I didn't do very well there. I'll write another one and I'll do it better this time.
You can't also always perceive what you've done when you're too close to the game.
No, of course
Yeah.
you can't.
No.
You in a way, you can't. It's very difficult to judge your own work.
That's why, in a way, that's really good for you and I to be looking at our photographs afterwards, because you might like something.
We're vicious. We might look like a
he's really
happy married,
he's really vicious.
happily married couple, but when we're judging each other's work, boy,
I really like this one. He hates it. Oh, but I really like this one. No, it's no good. So
we don't pull the punches.
No.
I'm mindful of the time, so I'll ask my last question, and that's what gives you hope?
Well, if you look at the world in the state it is at the moment, you could get very depressed, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And so I guess for me, I don't know whether it's hope or it's nature. It's nature in all its guises, that I just need to connect with nature to feel alive and to feel, hopeful, I guess. So it's not just the landscape, it's plants and flowers. I love flowers, and I just can't ever get over the beauty of how amazingly intricate and gorgeous they are. And that really, really uplifts me. So I guess that's a bit of a hope.
Easy answer. Young people. Young people. The irrepressible energy and innocence of young people that will tackle anything. That's what gives me hope for the future.
Thank you so much for joining me on the program this evening.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me for another evening of Radio Architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karim studio on Bunurong Country. You can replay the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
Hi, I'm Pat Tilley
I'm Peter Parker,
from the Chelsea Bomb Beach train station group.
and you're listening to Radio Karim.